Now, what happened when we got there? When I got there, I stepped off the plane in Lima, Peru, and on the Feast of St. Peter and Paul, June 29th, 1969. And that's when I began to live in a foreign country, and I've been living in foreign countries now for 46 years. When I stepped off the plane, you step off, you're young, you think you know it all, you think you're going to sort of save the world. Well, that sort of was shattered pretty quickly. The sights, the sounds, the smells, everything was so different than what I was used to experiencing in my much smaller world. Growing up in Pennsylvania, and near Pennsylvania Dutch country, and then for me, coming to a foreign country, the day we crossed the Appalachian Mountains on Route 30, over the mountains and coming down into western Pennsylvania and into Ohio was like going to the wild, wild west. Huh? We thought we were in a foreign land. And then some of the students, they would say to us, there were 3 of us from Pennsylvania, Carl Willman from Lebanon Bologna, if you ever heard of that, Lebanon, and George Horn and I. They said, "Where are you guys from? You talk funny." Huh? So it was sort of like that might have been my first experience of another culture. But we got to Peru, and like I say, this whole world opened up for us, because after Brunardale, we were at Canton, Akron, we were in rural Indiana at St. Joe College, and then all of a sudden we're in this new country where it was like being born again. Really, I often think about that. It was like being an experience of being born again, because as a little baby, we had to learn to walk, we had to learn the customs, we had to learn to speak, we had to learn all about the country and the etiquette, proper way to be at table and to eat and so forth. And it was an experience which, when you first go there, it's not humiliating, but it's really a humbling experience, because here you are, a grown adult, and you see these little kids running around, 1.5 years, 2 years old, speaking, and you can't even speak yet. They're speaking much better than we could speak, and that whole experience was quite broadening for me. And the faith. Up until that moment, my faith consisted in, I was certainly very much practicing devotions and prayers, but faith, I really hadn't come to the point where I was connecting a lot of that with life and lived experiences. It was, you learn your catechism, you go through all that, you say your prayers, you fulfill all the commandments of the church and so forth. But how does that all connect with life? I still hadn't come to that point when I left for South America. I say it was like beginning again, because the first day in language school in Lima, Peru, the teacher asked me, I said, "What is your name?" And I said, "Well, Barry." He said, "What?" I said, "Barry." And he said, "Well, the only Barry I know is a dog." I said, "If you don't change your name, you're going to be explaining your name the rest of your life. Don't you have another name?" I said, "Well, it was a baptized Barry Joseph." "Ah, Joseph, Jose, you are Pepe." Pepe is like diminutive, like Joe. So for the next 26 years, until today, actually, in the Spanish-speaking world and Portuguese-speaking world, I am Pepe, Padre Pepe. And the only time I ever used, again, my name, Barry, in 26 years in Latin America was when I had to sign an official document. Then I was Barry Joseph Fischer. But outside of that, I was always Pepe. So that was sort of significant in itself, indicating how this, like a new birth, a new beginning for me. Then you have the normal things of going through another culture, of learning to eat. One of the biggest challenges, I think, in Chile when I first got there was, to how to eat fruit with a knife and fork, or how to peel, something with a knife and fork, because, we're used to picking it up and pulling it apart. Well, you don't do that in Chile. You don't touch it with your hands. So I had to learn how to do all that. My father visited me 5 times in Chile, and he never mastered that. He said, please don't get me into an embarrassing situation where I have to use that knife and fork to cut open fruit. So he would always get something that he was sure that was, first of all, was dead, it was cooked. And secondly, they didn't have to use a knife and fork to be able to eat that fruit. And another thing was praying in a foreign language. You know, when I think about that, I think most of my life I've been praying in another language and not my native English. And believe me, it's not easy. In the first years, in every country I've been, half the time I was saying the words, but I really didn't know what I was saying. I guess, you know, luckily God understands all these things. He understood what I was trying to say. But by the time I would learn one language, I could pray in that language, I would go to another country and have to start all over again. I had to do that then in Italy, and now I'm struggling to do it in Austria and German. But praying in a foreign language, expressing yourself in another tongue. One of the most difficult things in the first years in Latin America was how to express feelings in another language. You know as well as I that many times it's hard to express our feelings in our own language. Well, try to do it in a foreign language. How to express what's inside you. And so there was a loneliness there, a solitude those first years where you really wanted to communicate on a deeper level than just, well, hey, it's nice out today, or how are you doing? I'm fine. How are you feeling? The weather's nice. You wanted to talk about something deeper. That was I found later to be a way of living poverty. We were poor. We weren't able even to express ourselves. And we talk about poverty in many levels, but that is certainly a way of experiencing the poverty of the gospel. I talked about landing in Chile, or in Peru, but how did I end up in Chile? Well, after a few months of language school and experiences our missions there, we had to learn or look for a place to study theology. They didn't know what to do with us. We were the first time they ever had any seminarians. So, you know, we pretty well had a free run of what we wanted to do. So Carl and I went all around Peru investigating seminaries and getting opinions. And finally, as we used to do in those days, we wrote a position paper. And we convinced our guys that the best place at that time to study would be in the Catholic University in Santiago de Chile. And so they gave us permission to go there and take up our studies. And we were happy because we would be near Tom and Jim, fellow companions. We went to Chile and began our studies, and Carl, after a couple months, couldn't manage the theology in Spanish, and so he returned to the States. And then I asked for a transfer to Chile, where there were other students, and Tom and Jim were there. And so Father Charlie Bricker at the time gave us permission gave me permission to stay in Chile.